The morning in the small town of Elmer started quietly. The sea was calm, and the sunlight touched the roofs of the houses like soft gold. Fishermen were getting ready for their day, and children were running along the beach. Everything felt normal until the light in the sky changed. It began as a thin line high above the horizon. People first thought it was a falling star, but it grew brighter and larger as it came closer. Birds scattered, dogs barked, and the sea started to move in strange waves. A strange ship, shining like silver glass, came down slowly toward the field near the cliffs. The townspeople left their homes and ran to the edge of the fields. No one had ever seen anything like it. The ship did not look like something built by human hands. It was tall, smooth, and almost alive in the way light ran across its surface. Among the people who gathered, a young man named Ethan Cole stood at the front. Ethan was known for his skill with machines. He was the kind of person who could fix anything with his hands. He had brown hair always a bit too long and eyes that carried quiet curiosity. When the strange light filled the air, he could not look away. Government vehicles arrived soon after. Men and women in dark uniforms put up barriers telling everyone to stay back. But even from a distance, people could see the wide door on the side of the ship open with a soft sound like a sigh of wind. From the doorway stepped a woman. Her movements were calm and graceful. She looked human, but there was something rare about her face, something too peaceful, as if she belonged to another age. She wore flowing clothes that shone softly in the light, and her hair moved like a ribbon of sunlight. For a moment, the people of Elmer forgot to breathe. She looked around, her eyes scanning the crowd, not with fear, but with curiosity. The language barrier was clear. When she tried to speak, her voice was musical but strange. The scientists and officers tried to speak to her, but their words made no sense to her. The world governments decided quickly that a translator was needed, not a language expert yet, but someone who could try to build communication from small steps. Ethan, by luck or fate, was chosen because of his calm nature and mind for patterns. He didn't think himself special, but now he stood only a few feet away from the mysterious visitor from beyond the sky. As Ethan walked toward her, his heart raced. He wanted to greet her, to show that humans meant no harm. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times on sleepless nights, meeting a visitor from another world, shaking hands, making history. But now, standing before her, his thoughts melted away. She turned her head and looked straight at him. Her eyes were bright and still, deeper than any sea he had known. It was not the kind of beauty that came from perfect features. It was something beyond that, a quiet power that made him forget the rest of the world. Ethan opened his mouth to say the words he had been trained to use. "Welcome, we come in peace." But no sound came out. His throat felt tight. The official lines vanished from his mind. All the rehearsed sentences felt small and wrong. Finally, almost under his breath, he said, "You're so beautiful I can't speak." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Everyone nearby froze. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then something unexpected happened. The woman's expression changed. Surprise flickered across her face, real, almost tender surprise. Her calm eyes widened, and she seemed caught between confusion and wonder. A soft color rose in her cheeks. No one had ever seen such a reaction from her kind before. She looked at Ethan, as if seeing him differently now, not as part of a crowd or a planet, but as one person. The officials whispered around them, but in that short moment, it was as though only the two of them existed. The sea wind blew between them, carrying the salt of the waves. Her lips parted, and for a second, it seemed she might speak his name, though she had never heard it before. Instead, she only nodded a small, graceful nod that said more than words could. Ethan, still trying to understand what he had just done, gave a nervous smile. The crowd broke into small waves of excitement. The cameras began to flash, and the reporters hurried to send the story to the world. But for Ethan and the strange visitor from the sky, the noise faded into the distance. In their silence, something new began a connection, fragile and real, that would change both their worlds forever. That morning in Elmer was the end of ordinary days. And though no one yet knew it, peace between the stars had just taken its first shy breath. The days after the strange arrival in Elmer were filled with wonder and noise. News reporters from every corner of the world came to the small coastal town. Scientists, soldiers, and politicians built tents and centers around the landing site. Cameras were everywhere. The people of Elmer watched from a distance as their quiet town became the most famous place on Earth. Ethan Cole was no longer just an engineer from a small town. He was now the first human to speak to the visitor from the sky, the woman who had stepped from the shining ship. People wanted to know exactly what he had said, and he became shy when they asked. He never meant his words to become such a big thing. But everyone wanted to believe that a simple, kind sentence had built a bridge between two worlds. The visitor was kept in a safe, quiet house near the field, while the governments worked on how to communicate with her. She was calm and never tried to run or hide. Many people came to study her clothes, her tools, her small silver books filled with strange marks. But nobody could understand her words. The translators worked day and night using every machine they had, but sound and meaning kept slipping away. Ethan was called back to see her again. The guards led him inside the quiet house. The moment she saw him, she smiled, a small, careful smile, but real. She said something in her soft voice, a stream of sounds that he did not know. He smiled back, feeling foolish but happy. He picked up a small notebook and drew a picture of the sun, then said, "Sun?" She watched him carefully, then whispered the same sound, "Sun?" Then she pointed to the window, where light poured in from the sky, and said another word in her own voice. Ethan nodded, pointing again, repeating both words. They spent hours like that, pointing, drawing, saying, and laughing softly when they made mistakes. Little by little, pieces of understanding started to grow, like seeds pushing through soil. When evening came, she pointed at herself and said, "Lyra." Ethan repeated it slowly, "Lyra." She smiled again, pleased that he said it right. Then she pointed at him. Ethan touched his chest and said, "Ethan." She tried his name, her voice rising gently, making it sound warmer somehow. As light faded outside, she looked through the window at the ocean, her eyes filled with wonder. She seemed deeply moved by the sight of the waves. She said something that Ethan could not translate, but he could read the feeling on her face. The next day he returned, bringing a small radio with music. He turned the dial and soft tunes filled the air. Lyra listened closely. Her expression changed as the notes floated through the room. Then she did something that surprised him. She moved her hands, tracing the rhythm as if painting the air with sound. It was a dance, slow and simple, but every motion seemed full of story. Ethan just stood there, forgetting to breathe. When she finished, she looked at him, waiting. But he clapped once, unsure what else to do, but his face showed pure respect. "Beautiful," he said. She didn't understand the word, so he repeated it, pointing to her, his heart full of awkward courage. "Beautiful," she whispered, testing the sound. Then she smiled again, that same shy smile that seemed to change the air around her. By the third day, Ethan noticed that whenever officials came in to ask questions, she would look toward him first, waiting for him to speak or nod before she answered. The guards saw it too. They stopped doubting his presence, accepting that somehow she trusted him. Every conversation between them was simple. A glass of water became a lesson. A chair, a door, a leaf, a cloud, each thing was a small piece of the growing exchange. The more they tried, the more laughter filled the room, soft and clear. At night, Ethan returned home, exhausted but alive with energy. His friends asked what she was like. He would always pause before answering, then say, "Only, she understands more than we think." He often stood by his window, watching the field beyond, where the silver ship rested under watchlights, its surface glowing faintly under the stars. Weeks passed, and the town slowly grew used to the strange visitors, the scientists, soldiers, and the quiet woman who now walked in Elmer's gardens at dusk. Children waved at her from behind fences, and she would raise her hand to greet them. The people whispered that she seemed gentle, lonely maybe, but always calm. One evening as the sun went down, Ethan joined her by the sea. They stood without words, watching the waves roll and crash. He thought about all the questions he wanted to ask: where she came from, what her home was like, why she came, but something in the moment told him to stay quiet. She looked at him, her eyes catching the last gold light of the sunset. She spoke one sentence in broken English, one she had learned through his lessons. "Earth is warm," she said slowly. The simplicity of it made his chest tighten. He nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's warm." She looked back at the sea, her hair lifting in the wind. And for that moment, they both felt something wordless, a fragile peace between two souls from different skies. Standing together at the edge of the world, the peaceful days in Elmer did not last. At first, it seemed like everything would stay calm forever. The woman from the sky, Lyra, continued learning words every day. She could now say simple sentences with Ethan, and they spent hours talking, drawing, and sharing ideas. She often asked about his world, about work, freedom, dreams, and love. Ethan answered as best as he could, choosing simple words so she could follow. But beyond the small town, something darker began to grow. Some people did not trust her. They feared what they could not understand. News channels argued day and night. Some said she was a gift, a sign of peace. Others said she was a danger, a spy, or a trap. The leaders of great countries wanted her knowledge and her ship. They wanted control over her power. Ethan did his best to protect her from these things. He kept her busy with lessons and long walks by the sea. He showed her how people lived simple lives, families eating together, children playing, shopkeepers laughing at small jokes. When she saw these moments, she smiled with honest joy. She began to speak with some villagers, offering shy greetings that made everyone's hearts softer. But one gray morning, everything changed. Ethan was repairing a broken part of her ship with a group of engineers. Lyra was inside, showing him how to restart a system that had stopped working. Her voice was steady, patient as always. But suddenly, the ground shook with a deep roar. Everyone turned to see a ball of fire rising from the far side of the field. The air became thick and hot, and people ran in every direction. Soldiers shouted for order. Lyra rushed out first and saw smoke pouring from the side of her ship. Something had exploded. Ethan grabbed a blanket and threw it over her shoulders to protect her from the heat. For a moment, they could see sparks like falling stars coming from the damaged metal. Then another small blast shook the earth. "Someone did this," Ethan said, looking around. Men running toward the ship with weapons drawn. Could not tell who they were. Be soldiers sent by another government, maybe people who wanted to steal her technology. The lines between fear and greed had become thin. Pulled Lyra behind a stone wall as another flash lit up the air. Smoke wrapped around them, thick and choking. Ethan's sleeve caught fire as he helped drag her to safety. He bit his lip against the pain and kept moving until they were far from the flames. The guards nearby saw them escape and surrounded them, trying to protect the strange guest. When they finally stopped, Ethan fell to his knees, his arm burnt and shaking. Lyra knelt beside him, her eyes wide with worry. She called for help, but no one came close. Everyone was fighting the fire. She touched his arm gently, and then reached into her belt pocket. She took out a small silver device that gave off a soft blue glow. She placed it on his wound. It shone for a few seconds, and the pain began to fade. Ethan stared, amazed, as the burned skin slowly began to heal. "You saved me," he said quietly, when he could speak again. She looked up, tears on her cheeks, and said in careful English, "You saved me first." News of the attack spread everywhere. Governments blamed each other. People spoke of war, fear, and secrets. Some said Lyra should leave Earth before more harm came. But when her guards came and told her it was time to go, she shook her head. "I stay," she said firmly. She looked toward Ethan, who was resting nearby. Her voice softened. "Earth need trust. You trust me? I trust you." Her words spread through the camp. Even the hardest soldiers could not argue with her calm strength. Ethan tried to stand that evening, his arm wrapped in white cloth. The doctors were amazed at how fast he was healing, though they didn't know the reason. He went to see her by the sea. She looked tired, but still stood tall, staring at the horizon. "You should leave before they try again," he said. She shook her head slowly. "My world far. But I come here for truth. If I go now, you think peace is lie?" Her eyes were serious, her voice firm. "I not go." Ethan looked at her, feeling something deep and strong he could not name. He nodded, knowing there was nothing he could say to change her mind. Together, they stood in the fading light, the smell of smoke still hanging in the air. The world was changing around them, and danger was growing, but in that moment, under the quiet sound of the waves, they shared a small, unspoken promise. They would face what came together. Days passed after the attack, and the field where the ship had landed no longer looked whole. Black marks on the ground reminded everyone of what had happened. Smoke had cleared, yet people still carried fear in their hearts. Soldiers guarded every corner of the site, and scientists worked quietly under their tents. Lyra stayed in the small white house near the shore. She did not show fear, though her eyes were often sad. She kept meeting with Ethan every morning. The two sat at a wooden table filled with books, papers, and tools. She still wanted to learn. She still wanted to talk about peace. Ethan admired her strength. He sometimes wondered how someone so gentle could be so firm. He spent long hours near her, trying to fix the broken parts of the ship. They worked side by side, saying little, but understanding much. Sometimes their hands touched as they passed tools, and both would pause for a second, feeling an odd kind of calm. When the sun set, they walked together near the sea. The wind played with her hair, and the sky turned orange before falling into night. Ethan always found those moments strange and quiet, as if the world was watching them but could not speak. One evening, she looked at him and said, "Earth people hurt, but also heal." Ethan nodded. "Yes, we're not perfect, but we try." She thought about that for a moment, then said softly, "Try is strong." Her way of saying things was simple, but carried great meaning. Ethan knew she was right. Trying meant hope, and hope was what their worlds needed most. Later that night, as he was walking her back to the White House, they heard a loud noise from the field. Something heavy fell, followed by voices shouting orders. They ran down the hill to see what was wrong. Lights flashed everywhere. Engineers and guards pointed at the sky where bright lines appeared like falling rain made of fire. One of the engines of the ship had restarted by itself, glowing fiercely. The scientists ran to stop the process, but it was too powerful. The air burned with light. People yelled, afraid it would explode again. Lyra stepped forward, still calm. Ethan caught her arm, but she looked at him gently. "I know how," she said. Without waiting, she walked into the light, going near the core of the ship. Her hands moved over a small glass panel. The strange writing lit up under her fingers. She whispered steady words to the machine, and the fire began to fade. The sparks turned to silver mist, and then the light went out. The noise stopped, replaced by deep silence. When she came back, everyone stared in awe. She was breathing hard, her face pale, but she smiled faintly. "Safe now," she said. The people around her began to cheer quietly, not loudly, but with honest relief. Even the soldiers who had never trusted her looked at her differently now. Someone who risked her life to protect their world could not be an enemy. Ethan helped her sit on a small bench nearby. Her hands trembled. He gave her water and whispered, "You could have died." She looked at him calmly. "Peace need brave hearts," she said. "I not leave when others risk for me." He did not answer. He only nodded and sat beside her while the stars blinked above them. In the silence, both of them listened to the night waves crashing below the cliffs. In the following days, the news spread fast again. People from around the world saw her as a symbol of peace. Children sent pictures and letters. Poets wrote about her courage. Lyra did not want fame, but she smiled when she saw how her actions gave others hope. One afternoon, she asked Ethan to teach her how to write in English. She held a pencil, slow and careful in her movements. She wrote one word on paper, "Trust." Then she looked at him questioningly, to see if she had done it right. He smiled. Perfect. She touched the word with her hand, almost as if she could feel the meaning through her fingers. "Trust make worlds close," she said slowly. That night, they sat outside again. The moon shone full and bright. Ethan played a small piece of music on a device he had brought. The gentle melody floated around them. After a while, she began to hum softly, matching the tune. It wasn't from her world or his, but something in between. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He knew she would have to leave soon, that her ship would one day fly again. But for now, he wanted to remember the sound of her voice mixing with the music and the sea. When the song ended, she leaned her head slightly against his shoulder, just for a short moment. Then she looked up at the moon and said in her simple, careful English, "Two hearts, two homes, one sky." And in that quiet sentence, Ethan heard everything he needed to know. Even if she left one day, they would never truly be apart. Morning came bright and clear after a long week of quiet. The ship on the field was finally whole again. Surface shone silver under the sunlight, smooth and new, as if all the damage and pain had never happened. People gathered near the site, watching in silence. It was the day everyone knew would come, the day Lyra would leave. Ethan stood by the edge of the cliff, the sea wind moving through his hair. He had been awake since before dawn, helping the engineers finish the last checks. But in truth, he was not thinking about machines or bolts. His thoughts were only of her. He tried to stay calm, but his heart kept racing. He turned when he heard light footsteps. Lyra walked toward him, wearing the same simple clothes she had worn since the landing. Her face looked calm, though her eyes carried a deep, quiet sadness. She stopped beside him and looked at the horizon, where the sky met the sea. "The ship ready," she said softly. He nodded. "I know." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the waves filled the space between them. He wanted to find the right words, but none seemed strong enough. Everything he thought of sounded small compared to what he felt. Finally, he said, "You changed this place. You changed everything." She smiled faintly. "Earth changed me too." They walked slowly down the path toward the field. People stepped back as they passed, watching but saying nothing. The soldiers who once treated her with suspicion now lowered their heads with respect. Children held handmade flowers and waved them gently. Lyra smiled at them with warmth that reached everyone's hearts. When they reached the ship, the door was already open. The inside glowed softly, bright yet peaceful. She turned to face Ethan one last time. For a moment she looked uncertain, almost afraid. Then she said, "I remember first day. You say I'm beautiful. You're right. That word not meaning look, but meaning heart." Ethan could not help but laugh quietly, though his eyes were wet. "That's exactly what I meant." She stepped closer and took his hand in both of hers. Her touch was warm. "Promise me you tell Earth people this. Tell them peace strong. Trust stronger, I promise," he said. The wind picked up. The scientists by the edge of the field gave signals to begin the launch. The soft hum of engines filled the air. Lyra looked up at the sky, then back at Ethan. "Thank you for showing me your world." "Thank you," he said, his voice rough, "for reminding us who we can be." She hesitated a moment longer, then slowly released his hand. She walked toward the ramp, her steps careful and light. Just before she entered, she turned back and looked at him one last time. Her eyes shone with tears that caught the sunlight. Then she lifted her hand in farewell. The ramp closed, and the ship began to rise. Wind swirled across the field. Grass bent, dust lifted, and light poured down like liquid silver. The ship moved higher and higher until it was just a bright star breaking through the clouds. The crowd stood silent for a long time after it was gone. They had no words. Ethan stayed there, looking up until the sky was empty again. His mind replayed every moment, the lessons, the laughter, the danger, the quiet evenings by the sea. He felt both proud and lonely. Days turned to weeks. Elmer slowly returned to its calm rhythm, though nothing felt the same anymore. Tourists came to see the field where the shining ship had landed. The government built a small center there, calling it the Peace Observatory. But Ethan stayed away most of the time. He preferred the cliffs, where he could watch the sea and remember. Sometimes he thought he saw a light in the sky, small and distant, moving slowly among the stars. Whenever he saw it, a smile touched his lips. Years passed. Children in schools learned about the visitor from the sky and the man who had spoken to her. People said that since that day, the world had changed little by little. Countries talked more and fought less. They built and shared more. Humans started looking upward, not with fear, but with hope. Ethan grew older, his hair turning gray, yet his eyes stayed bright, curious as ever. He still fixed machines, still walked by the ocean every evening, and sometimes when the light of the setting sun met the water, he thought he could almost hear her soft voice in the wind saying, "Two hearts, two homes, one sky." On a clear night, he sat by the shore with a cup of warm tea. The stars were clear and sharp above him. He whispered into the dark, not expecting an answer. "Kept our promise. We're still trying. We're still trusting." A gentle breeze moved through the tall grass, and a small shimmer of light appeared on the horizon. Quick, bright, and gone again. He smiled, knowing what it meant. Somewhere far beyond the sky, in another world, she was looking back at Earth. And between those two distant places, The promise they made still lived. Bright and strong, like the stars they both once looked at together,